because to do on top of everything else, but I'm really good because this is the product of it. And the title I'll show you, we're going to put through. And if you have a bad feeling, if it seems like I'm a highly talkative American, and I am, but I'm not going to read to you, I'm not going to dramatically read all 154 pages of text. You're welcome, and I'm not. And we are going to click through it because I want to go through chapter by chapter, showing you some highlights just to kind of whet your appetite, get you thinking about it. And we're going to start with the bad news first. And the bad news here in a minute are the 4 psychological disorders that have been found by the research to be the most common among female sex trafficking survivors. We'll cover those in the appendices here in just a minute. And because we need to learn to see what are these girls and women dealing with. And it'll explain stories in the book of Matthew, how Jesus reached 7 girls and women with this healing discipleship. How he treated girls and women with tremendous respect and honor and love and care, and treated them very differently than men, Jewish men, did at the time. And so it was very exciting. Can't wait to show you that. Post-traumatic growth is a term in psychology. Study has been, the term has been used a lot since 1985. 2 professors in North Carolina called Tedeschi and Calhoun. And they coined this phrase because for all the time, there's always been this thing called post-traumatic growth. They just use the phrase for it. And it's, why is it out of 100 people that go through a trauma, why is it that about 1 to 5% not only are not destroyed by post-traumatic stress disorder, but their lives are actually transformed, so much so that they develop life purpose and they go forth and help other people who've gone through traumas. So 95 to 99% of people are often, to various degrees, wiped out, really affected, depression, PTSD, anxiety. So what is it? Why is it that 1 to 5% of these people, so like 100 people go through a terrorist event, and they survive a bombing. Why is it 1 to 5 of them actually have a life-changing experience, and they grow through it, they change through it? So they started studying this, and so this is a part of my dissertation, because I believe that what I've seen, I've counseled now, I started counseling in Moldova, in Eastern Europe, went there for 6 years in a row, and I've done this kind of trauma counseling and training with sex trafficking survivors in about 10 countries. And so part of what I do, popping around the planet, I'm like a bee buzzing around, and I like to bring good news and best practices to people around the world. I want to tell you what I've learned in England, Belgium, and France, and not France, I worked there, she was there, Finland, and Sweden, and Moldova, and Ukraine, and Istanbul. And this is my 8th trip to Africa. So I like, and India, Sri Lanka, China. I like to tell you the good news about what wonderful people like you are doing around the world. I want to encourage you in your work as psychologists, behavioral therapists. So that's my title, Biblical Trauma Counseling, Female Sex Trafficking Survivors. So I'll pick up the pace here, and we'll march through a few things. And don't worry, I would love to, truly I'd love to tell you about all of it, but we're going to go through it kind of quick, just to give you a flavor for it. Big picture here on chapter 1, introduction, we'll cover that. And to tell you a few things there, the problems of trauma and sex trafficking, and we'll talk about how much sex trafficking there is around the world. There's labor trafficking, we call this human trafficking, is both. Labor trafficking, labor slaves, sex trafficking, sex slaves. And so, but human trafficking is the umbrella term. And I'm telling you this because this is what I found. I had to do a PhD on this to get all my terms right, my nomenclature accurate, consistent with the empirical international literature. And so, I want to point out a few things about the history of sex trafficking research. It's only 19 years old, only since 2009 has, 1999, has there even been an international field studying the effects of sex trafficking upon people. So this is all about sex trafficking survivors, not about labor trafficking. It's about sex trafficking, subfield. Here's I want to jump to appendices. And generally, dissertations there is nothing more boring than appendices. Because, you know, like you have an appendix, unless you have had your appendix taken out, you have an appendix over here. But the reason I think that the appendices are important is because even if you're not involved specifically in, see if I can do this. Can I pull this off? Yep, there it is. I'm happy when that happens. So here's page 161. We go through I'm certainly not going to read these, but I want to educate you because this is very important on background if you're involved in any kind of sex trafficking. The Palermo Protocol was adopted as international law, finally making global sex trafficking illegal. It really wasn't illegal until then. And so in Palermo, Italy, people met, and so that's what the Palermo Protocol made it illegal in international law to transport people, to sell people for sex, and to transport them to sell them for sex. And so here we have, I'm just going to go quickly through that because here we have like the definitions. Oh, that's it. I'll close this. Here we have the definitions. There's many legal definitions. Here we have the definitions. There's many legal definitions. And so there we go. So this is international law, which the United States and Nigeria both hold to. And then this is the United States version of it in the year 2000, the Victims of Trafficking and Violence Protection 2000. So when I said that the study started, this field in psychological literature started only in 1999, 1 year later, the international law caught up. And then I think I was talking to some of our NAPTIP friends and partners, and NAPTIP actually was started back in 2003. And we actually don't have, I'm glad we have NAPTIP in Nigeria, we do not have a agency in charge of all the care, prosecution, prevention in America. I wish we did. So, but we don't, America. So that's the law. And then here's some important stuff. Appendix 3, see, I'm a nerd now, a scholar, so I really like this stuff. It really seems kind of boring, maybe, but if you're interested in learning about trafficking, when you get the PDF, these are really important. The Face of Modern Slavery. This is the Department of State, our State Department puts out an annual trafficking and persons report. Here's the Face of Modern Slavery. And then here's what I want to get to and talk to you about. This is small. There are 4 disorders for all of us psychologists and behavioral therapists, 4 disorders as defined by the DSM-5, Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental and Nervous Disorders. 5 disorders, and you'll recognize them, 3 especially. It's going to be anxiety, depression, PTSD, and then the one that has less recognized, but less as important, and that is cognitive impairment. So we're going to take our time and go through these, and I won't read the whole thing, but I want to highlight these symptoms. If you work with anybody with anxiety, you'll recognize these. So let's look at these right here and think about you may be counseling, in particular people that have severe trauma. And these are the 6: restlessness, easily fatigued, difficulty concentrating, irritability, muscle tension, sleep disturbance. These are the 6 primary, we won't talk about the diagnosis, how many of those you have to have. You know, the important thing, if you work with trauma survivors, if they have anxiety, they may have, if they have anxiety, they will have these. But most importantly, I want you to think about traumatized populations you work with. It could be refugees, it could be anybody, street kids, homeless people, people that have been through war, people that have been through terrorism survivors. Anybody with anxiety is going to have these 6. So think about these. These are all pretty straightforward. I'm not going to spend much time on those because these are pretty straightforward, and it gets more and more kind of confusing as we go. Now we get into the second one. It's called major depressive disorder. And look at these 9. If you're a counselor, You know about these 9. These are the nine criteria, the 9 symptoms that people with depression have. And you have to have 5 of them. So briefly, I'll read them all. Depressed mood most of the day, nearly every day. A decreased interest in things you actually do like. Significant weight loss, weight gain. Insomnia, can't sleep. Hypersomnia, the only thing you want to do is sleep. And then psychomotor agitation, retardation, nearly every day. That one's a little less understandable. That just means that you're psychologically agitated, and or you're like keyed up. You're agitated, you can't sit still, can't sit still. Psychomotor retardation means that you just like sit in a chair where you stare at a wall. Your body doesn't move, your mind doesn't move, and you're you're fried. That's a sign of depression. And then fatigue or loss of energy nearly every day. And a very important one, this one's, they're all subjective, but this one comes up a lot with everybody, especially trauma survivors of sex trafficking. Feelings of worthlessness or excessive or inappropriate guilt. That's very important. Feeling guilty about things that you're not even guilty of. And so what we deal with sex trafficking survivors who've been through horrible things, they just don't feel, you might think, oh, they feel horrible. Yes, they feel violated, abused, yes. But sadly, they actually feel guilty. They actually feel like they did it. It's like their fault. Oftentimes, trafficking survivors have come from not just kind of not so good homes. Sometimes they've come from horrible home situations. And that's one thing that put them at risk for being sex trafficked. So they might have been in a bad home and for 12 years, and then they were sex trafficked for 4 years. So sadly, the 4 years of sex trafficking and being raped thousands of times in 4 years, that actually falsely confirmed the lies that they thought about themselves, that they weren't important, that nobody loved them, that nobody cared about them, and they were just worthless, they're scum. They thought that already as year 12, and then they were sex trafficked. So this stuff is wound very tight, it's layered very deep, and that's why we need more people that are trained on how to help survivors. And you have to commit to being with them and really work with them for years, because this is extremely difficult stuff. There's no quickly getting over any trauma, but especially no quick way to get over years of sex trafficking trauma. And then diminished ability, this one comes up again, to think or to concentrate, or indecisiveness. Remember that? And then recurrent thoughts of death, not just fears of dying. So you can imagine with depression in general and a sex trafficking survivor, those of us that work with them, friends, relationships, and mentoring, discipleship, that there's lots of thoughts of death, lots of thoughts about suicide. They just feel so worthless. And then, that's true anyway. And then what makes it worse, they start counseling with a crazy person like me. So I've counseled about 55 survivors now. I'm currently counseling about 20, about 12 in Austin live, and about 8 around the world on Skype. And you might think as well, if you don't know much about me, like why in the world with a girl or a woman who's been horribly raped by men, thousands of times, you can't even say hundreds because that would be a month or two. How in the world with a girl or a woman want to talk to me, especially anybody around the world, like crazy middle-aged white men from America, like me. But I'll come to that in our second half, and I talk about what people need. People need you to be real. They need you to be genuine. They don't need you to try to pretend to be, a professional or something. They need real, and that's why my biggest appeal to you today, which we'll come to in the second half, is to work on your own trauma. What are the traumas in your life, your childhood, your adolescence? If you're a professional, you've done all the work, you've gone to school, you're a professional, but the traumas in your life will hold you back. And that's why we have to be brave and continually grow and learn, because their trauma, any trauma you have that's unresolved, will be triggered in counseling sex trafficking survivors, because they will tell you the most horrible things you've ever heard, not most you've ever heard, you have never heard. I can tell you, I'm counseling 55, currently counseling 20 of them, you have never heard things like this. Torturous, I don't do secondary trauma, I will not tell you any stories. I'll mention adjectives. Vile, evil, abominable, wicked, horrible stuff that the worst that happens in the world, that's what you get to hear. And so now nobody's going to want to volunteer to be a counselor. And say, well, I was going to go talk to Ann about volunteering to be a counselor at the Great Little Lighthouse, but now it's not for everybody. It's not for every counselor. You know, but if God Almighty gives you vision for it, gives you heart for it, He can prepare you. I can help you, and because I want to multiply myself and replicate myself. And then that's two diagnoses. And let's go on to the third: post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD. The third diagnostic criteria found in the research I did. Third most, these are not ranked in order, but I put them in order of kind of how they occur. Anxiety comes first. Remind me to do the anxiety necklace. No, you draw the anxiety necklace, thank you, Sam. And I'll explain to you about the connection between anxiety and depression after the break, diagram for you. And then this is the third one, post-traumatic stress disorder. And so it's different than anxiety, but overlaps. It's different than depression, but overlaps. And so briefly, exposure to a traumatic event, witnessing a traumatic event, learning about a traumatic event that happened to a close family member or a friend. And then fourth, experiencing repeated or extreme exposure to adverse details of traumatic events. Like, for example, this is, of course, any accident, rape, murder, horrible things happen to you. But it can even be hearing about it. For example, in America, those of you that are older, you remember in America, we had terrorist attacks in 9/11. And so leave it to America. So for months and months, it was on the news over and over and over again. And we saw planes hitting buildings and the Twin Towers falling down and the thousands of people that were killed. And some people didn't know they really should be watching the news. Watch this over and over. It actually increased the post-traumatic stress disorder of millions of Americans because they didn't need to see this over and over and over again. It wasn't good for them. It caused them unnecessarily prolonged trauma. We don't need to know what's going on in the news. We just don't need to see the Twin Towers fall over and over again, knowing that as that happened, 2,500 people were dying as the building was falling. We just didn't see that, but people would do that. We were careful about it in our home. And then it's proven, the evidence of this is proven when you have, and this is sex trafficking survivors have this, sex trafficking survivors, like I said, when they start counseling, things get worse because they've been suppressing this stuff ever since. They may be out of counseling a month, they may be out of counseling a few years, but they've been suppressing thousands of horrible sexual assaults, torture, death, participating in death, worst possible stuff. I won't say anything worse than that, I promise. But they've been stuffing it down, and then they come to counseling with a funny guy, crazy guy like me, and we gradually start working through it. And I'm not making them tell me stories. The stories come up every day. Sex trafficking survivors will have nightmares at night, flashes, daymares during the day, intrusive thoughts in the middle of work, in the middle of school, in the middle of driving. Anything can trigger a memory from sex trafficking, because anything, a chair, I won't say how, can trigger a memory of being sexually assaulted. And so anything can, so we have to be aware of this, and we have to be prepared to help them, because at any time something could blow up, and it just doesn't come up. It comes up and then they relive it and have body memories, and the body feels like it's happening to them right now. It's a term, body memories. And so then, and there's more about post-traumatic stress, but I think we want to move on to the fourth one, major neurocognitive disorder. And so we say cognitive disorder, and by that, this is the fourth disorder that I found in the research, as that has been found by all research studies, and there's not a lot of them, but it's been found to be consistently present, and that is simply that sex trafficking survivors, because of the trauma in their life, not, if you will, I want to say the word just, in addition to emotional trauma, psychological trauma, because of so many head injuries, like being slammed to the floor, wall, kicked and punched in their head, they've had hundreds of concussions. You've ever had a concussion, you trip and fall down, where you have a concussion, and you hit the car the car windshield or something, that happens to sexual survivors hundreds of times. So they can have some long-term brain damage that makes it hard for them to actually think. And so that significant decline in cognitive function and substantial impairment in cognitive performance. And then it's simply that they can't think like you know that they could. This is not about having low intelligence. It's not about IQ kind of thing. It's just simply that you see they're very indecisive. They have a hard time concentrating. They have a hard time sometimes finishing the dishes. They have a hard time in school, hard time doing chores around the house. And things that you would think that a young woman would, could, should be able to do, and it's because she might be cleaning her room, and then 2 minutes into it, she's just sitting there staring at the wall. And she's not being lazy. That's why it's important you know about these things. She's not being lazy, not being stubborn, but actually her mind is just gone blank. It's either completely blank or she's reliving a horrible memory that just came up. So to know about this stuff, and so that when you work with them, not just in counseling, but you work with them at home, you can talk to them about it and have some dialogue that's going to be helpful, because one of the most important things, and this is how I get the help, in spite of me being a man, because I'm not a threatening man, and because I worked on my own trauma, and when I had my own trauma, childhood, adolescence, growing up, I had a great mom and dad, great life now. But I grew up in the Philippines, Pakistan, and in Singapore. Been to a couple of war zones. I was in India and Pakistan. I was in Vietnam during the war as a 9-year-old boy. And said, is that a good idea? Fine. And but also, it's not just my traumas then. What I work on with brain counseling, my masculinity, my body image issues, my sexuality, so that I'm not a creep. So that when I'm working with these girls and women, they don't get a weird vibe from me. I'm not hitting on them. And the things they tell me do not sexually arouse me, but the things they tell me also do not disgust me. And so they see that I am relaxed. I am, I'm cool. I can sit with them and they can vomit out those, and I'm not going to freak out. I'm not going to sexually abuse them. I'm not going to run from the room and throw up. None of that. I'm just going to sit with them. And there's one thing I might do. You know what I might do? I might cry. And oftentimes I'm counseling them, I cry before they cry. Because if I'm counseling them, and if I'm counseling them, that especially early on in their trauma recovery, they haven't yet even begun to decompress at all. And so I'm feeling the sadness of it before that they feel the sadness of what they're saying. That's the Bible. Romans 12:15, weep for those who weep, rejoice for those who rejoice. So I'm going to ask Samantha Stokesbury to come up. She's a friend of mine and I've known her for a year. And since meeting her in Cape Town a year ago, she's begun a master's degree in professional counseling at Liberty University in the United States. And she works with STOP. So tell us a little bit about that. And that's a ministry, outreach and prevention work in South Africa, Cape Town, South Africa. And I wanted to ask her in particular, in the context of these 4 disorders, in particular, to talk to you first about her experience. Because she volunteers down on Long Street in Cape Town, brothel district. And every Friday night they go out and they meet the women, the treasures that are on the streets still being trafficked. And she's witnessed lots of these things on sidewalks. So I wanted her to explain to you how she sees this, and then we'll continue. Okay.
Good afternoon, everyone. It's wonderful to be here with you. Thank you, Kyle, for the introduction. As he mentioned, my name is Samantha, and I currently have been living in Cape Town for the past 4 years. So for the past 3.5 years, I've been working for an NGO called STOP, which stands for Stop Trafficking of People. So at STOP, we focus more on prevention. So we would rather a girl or a boy never be trafficked at all instead of having to do the restoration process, because of how long, you guys know, it's a long and hard process. So we would rather they never had trauma in the first place instead of having to heal them and walk them through the healing process. So that's our heart. But I also work with an organization called Straatwerk, which means street work in Afrikaans. And what we do is they focus on restoration. So from their side, we go onto the streets, as Kyle said, every Friday. We go out with snacks and water and phone numbers. And when we see a girl, we call them treasures. When we see one of them, a girl in prostitution or a girl who is being trafficked on the street, we just love her. We try and love on her. We talk to her. We ask her how she's doing. We try and find out, how did you get here? What's going on? Where are you from? And I'll tell you guys, most of the girls that I've met in South Africa that are being trafficked or in prostitution are from Nigeria and Zimbabwe. So those are the two biggest foreign countries that we see. There are South African women, but there's a lot of foreign women that have come to South Africa looking for work, looking for opportunity, which is wonderful goals, amazing goals. They want to bring money back home to their families, which is honorable. And then something happens, they get scammed, they get tricked, they can't find work, and they end up on the streets. So we just try and give them hope and show them how they can get out of the industry and that we will walk with them through that process. So that's what we do. So before I dig into this, I just want to ask, how many of you have already counseled or worked with a sex trafficking survivor? If you could raise your hand. Okay, this is great, actually. Then I'm really glad all of you guys are here. So I'm gonna just share a little bit about, tied into what Kyle was saying about these 4 disorders. When working with some of the girls on the street, we see this play out in real time. So like as I'm approaching a girl, there's so many different reactions that she'll have. So I'm going up to her and she doesn't know me. She has no idea who I am. I'm this, white American girl on the streets of Cape Town. She has no idea what to expect. And so I'm coming up to her and I want to build a relationship. So I'm being nice. I'm like, hi, my name is Sam. How are you? What are you doing out here? And so I'm just trying to be nice and I'll get looks like disgust, looks like, who are you white talking to? I'll get girls, there's been a couple times where I was speaking to a girl, she was from Nigeria, passionate, you guys are so fierce and passionate. And this girl, beautiful girl, was standing there and I wanted to go over and give her some chips and just say hi and get to know her. And as soon as we made eye contact, so she's standing on the street and she's kind of looking, watching the people walk by, and she turns and she sees me come up to her, she goes, and she runs. She sprints across the street. And I'm standing there like it's kind of embarrassing. I feel a little bit, when that first happened, I felt rejected. I felt like, oh man, did I do something wrong? What's wrong with me? And so all those thoughts started to go through my head, and that happens all the time. So depending on their reaction, and some of those things that Kyle mentioned, it could be you're talking to a survivor and maybe she starts screaming at you. She starts cursing at you for no reason. All you did was say, are you hungry? Or how was your day? And she's, no, and she starts screaming. And it's, whoa, and that could offend you and say, hey, no, that's not okay. And so we get offended and bothered by the way they respond. And sometimes maybe we'll speak to them, as I have with some girls on the street, and they forget what I said after 2 minutes of conversation. So I'll ask her about her kids. I'll say, hey, do you have any children? And she'll say, yes, I have 2 kids, Sally and Joe. And I'll say, wow, that's wonderful. How old are they? What? How old are your kids? What? What kids? Oh my goodness. It's like, okay, well, wonderful to meet you. Moving on. So there's a lot of weird things that happen like that, and it happens all the time, and it's very normal. So just from the show of hands, not many of you have worked with sex trafficking survivors. So the first time may be kind of frustrating. I think that's a good word. It can be kind of frustrating. It can upset you. It can even trigger some of your own trauma, as what Kyle was speaking about, which I just want to say to you guys, and as I'm walking through this process and learning more and more about counseling and sex trafficking survivors, I'm realizing that there's so much I don't know. And every single girl is different, and boys, because boys are also trafficked. But what I'm realizing is that the more that I work on my own trauma, the more that I work on my own triggers, we call them trauma triggers. If I've had abuse in my past, and a girl that I'm speaking to tells me about her abuse, and I haven't dealt with mine yet, or I'm still bitter or angry, or hurt by something that happened to me as a child, then when she's sharing her heart with me, I may start getting like uncomfortable. It may make me angry because I'm thinking about the man who abused me, or what I want to do to him because I'm frustrated, I'm mad. And so she'll see that and she'll feel that in me as I'm trying to speak to her. And then my attitude towards her is actually going to cause like a block. Does that make sense? So as I'm trying to love her, if that reaction happens and she starts getting mad and then I start getting mad, we're not going to get anywhere. So the more that I heal through my own stuff, the easier it's going to be for me to love on her no matter what she says. No matter how, as Kyle said, some of the stuff is horrible. So no matter what she or he says, I'm going to be able to look at her and say, I may or may not know what that's like, but I'm going to love on you and we're going to walk through this together and I'm here for you no matter what, and nothing you say is going to make me run. Nothing you say is going to make me hate you, make me be disgusted by you, nothing. But that can only happen when we've dealt with our own things, right? So just another thing I want to say is that as we heal through all of our own stuff, and as we start to recognize that the way the girls and the survivors respond isn't about us, because I think sometimes when we counsel, we take things personally. We can take things personally. Whereas it has nothing, when she curses at you, it has nothing to do with you. Praise the Lord. That's amazing. That's great. So no matter what she does, it has nothing to do with you. So that frees you up to be able to love on her, counsel her, disciple her, whatever you need to do. But what it does for us too is that it increases our capacity to love, to forgive. It gives us this ability to be patient, where maybe if we start getting triggered, we become very, very impatient. Like, you need to get better now. I want to fix you. I want to heal you. I want to make this stop. Stop doing the same thing wrong all the time. Because that's the way we've done that to ourselves, or we were raised that way. So once we work on all of that, then we'll have this compassion that we didn't have before. And then lastly, just the goals. I just want to add, our main goals when we work with these survivors is we want to empower them to be able to find freedom, to be independent, to make their own decisions. A lot of the girls that I've worked with on the street, they don't know what it's like to be able to stand up for themselves or make a decision for themselves or feel what it's like to be in control. They've never really had that. And so as we interact with them, whether it's in a counseling session or on the street, we want to honor them in everything that we do and say. So we want them to feel like they are valued, that they matter, no matter what they've gone through, what they say to you, what they do in the counseling room. No matter what it is, we want them to know, hey, I'm for you. I'm here for you. Just like Kyle and I, we're here for you guys to equip you and help you however we can so that you can go out and do the same stuff that we do. So, thank you.
Thank you, Sam. All right, this is not the big break. Stand up. Don't go anywhere. Just stand up and stretch. Maybe in Nigeria, your bottom doesn't get sore because you're really cool or something like that. In America, we like to say that the mind can't comprehend any more than the bottom can handle. So stretch. We'll have a real break here in a bit, but good time to stretch out. And then I'll start reading my entire dissertation to you. Yes. If you knew me better, you'd be more afraid about that. All right, whenever you get the blood pressure better, you start feeling your bottom again. It's like, okay, all right, now you can sit down. So I want to quickly go through the chapters. I'm really glad Sam shared with us. I went out, it's all a blur. A week ago Friday, is that when it was? Went out with her and how many teams? About 30 of us were out on the streets in little groups of 5, 4 women, the 2 teams, and then 1 man, just, watching out, being an eagle. And it's just amazing, amazing work. And it's so awesome to see these 2 groups of women. And you have to have, calling to do it, because you're just walking right up to women who would rather not talk to you. They're looking for men, because if they don't, whether they have pimps or they're not, they're in trouble. They're in trouble if they're not making money. They're talking to Sam. They're like wasting time, and they're not making money. They're talking to Sam. But because this is a ministry that's been going on for 50 years on Long Street, God bless them in Cape Town, that the emphasis is please keep coming back. And Sam and the women out there, they know these women for like weeks and weeks and years, months, long time. It's about relationship, So I'm going to quickly go through the dissertation. And again, don't worry about capturing this. You can have the whole PDF. I'm going to send it to you. After I'm done, you're not going to want it because it'll be so long. But just on introduction, I have a 40-page bibliography. So if you're going to do any research on this, then please enjoy my bibliography of books and articles and dissertations and UN reports. That's all at the end. But please, if you do any paper, if you're doing a college paper, if you're doing a secondary school paper on trafficking, use the research I found because I make you feel really good about it because it's going to help somebody else. So that's why I sent this around the world since May. Just want to say this, 45 million conservative estimate there, 45 million trafficking, labor and sex trafficking, slaves currently around the world as a 2016 number. And so of course it's much higher than that. These UN groups make these estimates. They're wise to make for conservative estimates because sometimes these things get too inflammatory and exaggerated. We want to have really good professionalism in all our work, best practices with the people, and the highest level of ethics and non-exaggeration when we work with the statistics. So about 45 million. And so what I was looking at here in my research problem, I was trying to find out, is there any, what is the research out there for effective methods of counseling for sex trafficking survivors? And I won't make you wait 2 chapters, but the big news is there's no research at all that shows any effectiveness for any types of counseling, including mine, my Beatitude Trauma Model. I've not done any empirical research on it. And so, nor did this dissertation, nor was it actually proving that post-traumatic growth can occur because I have counseled someone with a Beatitude Trauma Model. There's no research on that at all. But I'm proposing this, and I'm saying this is the kind of counseling I've been doing for 33 years now. And in the past 9 years, I've been having a wonderful, wonderful time applying it to female sex trafficking survivors. Definition of terms, research methodology, and there's a famous book, 2009, 27 million people. And even in the course of time, I have to tell you this, even the course of time that I've been researching this, sex trafficking is getting worse around Nigeria, around America, around South Africa, around the world. When I started seminary 8 years ago, human trafficking, labor and sex trafficking, was the 3rd largest illegal activity behind what? Drugs and arms, illegal arms. And then about 5 years ago, it was the 2nd behind drugs, human trafficking, and arms. And then 2 years ago, it became officially UN, all estimates, by far, the number one, $150 billion a year, very small estimate, $150 billion a year generated on human trafficking, labor and sex trafficking. And then comes drugs, and then comes arms. And the reason why is that illegal crime gangs, America, Russia, Nigeria, South Africa, they discovered that it's unlike you can sell an AK-47 once and you can resell it, but it kind of has decreasing value. And even a kilo of cocaine, you can sell it once, you cut it down and sell it, and poof, it's gone. If you buy, I say this with love because I know many, a 12-year-old girl, and you can keep her alive for like 4 years, and 4 years, and then 4 years of her being raped thousands of times, you can make millions of dollars, tens of millions, of naira. And so it's actually the scale is huge. And so they're sadly figuring this out. So that's why it's getting worse. We're all trying to do something about it, but it's getting worse because they're figuring out you can make so much more money on a 12-year-old girl than cocaine, than you can on hashish, than you can on selling AK-47. And so we have to wake up to this. And as I say in the history, I do want to write a book on the history of sex trafficking throughout all of world history. There's always been sex trafficking. I have a section here about the sex trafficking in the Bible. The Bible, Old New Testament, talks about sex trafficking. So let's go through this quickly. Many things. Like I said, it's only a 19-year-old male's 1999 book, Disposable People. Everybody marks that as a kickoff of the modern era of people saying, we need to do something about this. We need to find out where is it, what's happening, what can we do about it, how does it affect people? 1999. And in this tiny little baby, it's actually called a baby field, a baby with the girl, a baby field, only 19 years old on psychological research is very, very young. There's 100 years worth of research on depression, 100 years of research on anxiety. Only 19 years has this been studied. And that's why I encourage you to ask for my PDF and read it if you're interested in this field. And because there's